Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted not only to be joined by Lawrence Connolly but also Danny Kelly. Welcome back to the show, Danny. How are you doing?
Fantastic, mate. Thanks for having me.
You brought your guitar along. Let's start the show off with a tune.
Cool. This land is your land, this land is my land. From the northern highlands to the western islands, from the hills of Kerry to the streets of Freedery, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking by Shannon Water, hand in hand with my little daughter, heard the church bells ringing, heard the children singing. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From the northern highlands, oh, to the western islands, from the hills of Kerry to the streets of Freedery, this land was made for you and me. We climbed a mountain by the crystal fountain, and we heard the waves roar by the rocky seashore. Her eyes were gleaming, she cried, oh daddy, oh this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From the northern highlands, oh, to the western islands, from the hills of Kerry to the streets of Freedery, this land was made for you and me. I walked her home by the old church steeple, proud of my country, proud of my people, of the men who cried there and the men who died there singing. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From the northern highlands, oh, to the western islands, from the hills of Kerry to the streets of Freedery, this land was made for you and me. Well, I'm singing, this land was made for you and me. Thank you.
Some start to the show. Brilliant, Danny. And if you want to get some merchandise, Danny Kelly merchandise, please visit the website at the address along your ticker tape. There is a 10% discount for fans of A Celtic State of Mind. The promo code is AXOM. So thank you very much for that, Danny. So how have you been since the last time you've been on the show?
Very well, yes. I can't say I'm enjoying the football at the minute, but I enjoyed the last game very much. We're into the final, so I'm happy with that. Europe, not too well against AC. Loved the game against Lille. The first half was absolutely spectacular. I mean, yeah, life's good, getting on with it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, Danny, because I know that, you know, the world of live entertainment has been hammered more than probably any other sector. And it's a shame where you see people whose life depend on performing live getting told to go away and retrain. Yep. Go and find a job somewhere else. I mean, that's horrific to be told that. I mean, there seems to be no support package for the industry you're involved in.
No. We were told that there would be. We were told there was going to be a bursary fund basically getting doled out to all musicians. And I know some musicians did get some sort of fund based off their kind of tax records and stuff like that. But, I mean, in the life of a musician, you know, 1 month you might have 5 gigs, the next month you might have 1. So there's no way to base that. And the government have screwed over so many performers, not just musicians. There's people who run cabaret shows, there's artists, there's, you know, all types of performers, and everyone's been left in the dark completely. And I mean, I've taken a aggressive approach on Twitter towards members of the government to ask where this money has gone, because it doesn't seem like it's going to appear anywhere it just seems like they said, okay, here's money, we'll just put it in this pot, but nobody touch that pot, don't look at that pot, don't even think about the pot. We're just going to say this week, and then we're just going to leave you in the dark. So, I mean, performing live on Facebook is essentially all we have. Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and stuff like that. The last time I was on, actually, Lawrence, you told me about a streamable.
Yeah. To
use. So I did some delving into that, and I found an app which works perfectly on my iPhone, which allows me to stream on different platforms. But it's tough going, you know.
Tough going, Danny, and you know, you're always welcome to come on here and play a few tunes and try and promote anything new that you're releasing in terms of music. And obviously for Danny Kelly merch, get onto that site. The web address is at the bottom of your page, and support entertainers, support music, Danny. You know, that's what we're trying to do here. Now, Lawrence, you're sitting in the background there. You're very quiet. It's not like you.
Aye, unusual.
Just enjoying the tunes.
I mentioned politics and you said nothing.
I love Danny's tunes, but
cheers.
I think the hospitality in general, it's almost as if they've been punished. And if you look at the measures that, you know, the pubs have put in places to keep their staff and patrons safe, but yet again, if you know, they're locked down, it feels as if the Scottish Government is punishing them. And I suppose this week it looks like the Scottish Government, you know, will punish some and not others, which remains to be seen, but it certainly appears to be the way.
Well, let's talk about that, Lawrence, because we had a wee chat before we came on live, all around the punishment or otherwise of breaches of COVID rules. And let's talk about what we call the small bubble of Scottish football, and some of the examples that we've had so far, the much publicised situation involving Bolingoli when it comes to Celtic, and obviously what happened to the club and to the individual. And then yesterday there was breaking news when we were live on a Celtic State of Mind that there had been breaches involving two players from Ibrox. So what's your thoughts on the way that this is being managed?
Well, it seemed to be stage managed the way the news broke, didn't it? You know, Rangers released a statement, police released a statement, Scottish Government releases a statement. Nothing, more or less, nothing to see here. I think it's Rangers, is it their fourth breach? You know, you'd Bale Gerrard's sharing a car, you'd deciding to play the friendly before the results were back from coronavirus tests. The UEFA had to find them over their breaches at the Gala game, and now this is their fourth breach. And it would appear that there's nothing to see here. The Scottish Football Joint Response Group, Celtic's breach was Bolingoli, and I think Aberdeen get dragged into that punishment, you know, because their breach had been prior to Bolingoli, had broken, and there was a rush to punish Celtic, an indecent rush.
What do you think, though, when something like that happens, Lawrence? You are waiting for a bit of action, a bit of proactive action on the part of the club, surely. I mean, it doesn't have to be something that you're coming out publicly to slate any decisions, but you would hope that in the background discussions are being had in relation to that, the disparity, if indeed nothing is done to the club or the players.
All we're looking for is fairness, isn't it? You know, you had Nicola Sturgeon on talking about the fairness of the furlough scheme automatically kicking in England and Scotland all have their things. You know, fairness transcends all things, doesn't it? You know, we've got it, everyone's born with an innate sense of what's fair and what's unfair. We're only looking to be treated fairly, and right now it would appear it's, you know, not only do the football authorities appear to govern Rangers to a different standard, you know, in relation to 5-way agreement. You know, Rangers challenged at court. We know the SFA, you know, are bound, not or don't seem to have the power to, under that agreement, to punish Rangers. And now the Scottish Government seems to be thinking, well, yeah, punish Celtic, but Rangers, you know, commendable. Was it commendable they used describing their actions?
They commended them. Instead of saying, while they done the right thing, they should still be facing investigation and punishment for it. Which, there was no doubt in my mind, the minute it came out about Bolingoli, that the SFA, the SNP, and everybody else would be looking into it straight away. But now the government have come out and said they commend Rangers.
Yeah, big difference,
It's
isn't it?
Night and day.
It is. It certainly is. And we thought we would get off to a cracking start with Danny playing some tunes, which was tremendous. And we've spoken a wee bit about politics as well. Yesterday we had Kevin Graham in the studio, and we are currently trying to upload a video that Kevin recorded yesterday as a tribute to Charlie Gallagher, who turns 80 today. So we will see if that upload is successful during the broadcast. If it isn't, we will put it out as a separate video on YouTube directly after the broadcast. But it is one to savour. It's a classic from Kevin Graham, from the pen of Kevin Graham, and it's a tribute to Charlie Gallagher. How important, when you think back, Lawrence, when you think back to his part in Jock Stein's revolution, how important was Charlie?
He was a player that Stein turned to for magic as well as Johnson, wasn't it? A bit of magic. His corner kicks are legendary onto Billy's head. So, yeah, it wouldn't have happened without him, would it? You know, it was the amount of goals he set up from the set pieces, brilliant feat. You know, he's an integral part. And I think a lot of the players suffer from people only focusing on the players that played in the game, that played in the final. Mm-hmm. But
you can't forget Big John Fallon, the substitute goalie. He's got the winner's medal. You see him in that famous picture, Lawrence, at full time, where everybody just leaps from the bench. Victory. Well, of course, the one person missing is Jock Stein, because he went for a walk just before the final whistle. But you see Sean Fallon nearly mocking, I think, the Docks there, Benny Rooney and Bob Rooney, and also John Fallon. Famous image, beautiful image. But you're right, John Hughes has got to be remembered, Joe McBride, Charlie Gallagher. You've got to remember these people, and Willie O'Neill as well, who they contributed to that phenomenal achievement. Now, the video of Kevin Graham reciting his new poem on Charlie will be uploaded to YouTube, because it's taken a wee while longer than expected when we're running the broadcast with two cameras. So, something to look forward to. But yeah, we can't forget people like Charlie. Happy 80th birthday, and what a lovely fella as well, Danny, when you see him, representing Celtic, right up to the present day.
Absolutely. It is, as you said, it's one of those names that he wasn't in the final. And a lot of people seem to forget. They think of the 11 men, and I've met John Fallon several times. What a lovely, lovely guy. I've actually never had the pleasure of meeting Charlie, but just let me touch on the fact John Fallon was there in Lisbon, and every time you think of that team, the Lisbon Lions, people don't initially. John Fallon doesn't roll off the tongue, and I think that's a crime. Funnily enough, there is actually Danbury Mint have done a collection of the carat. I don't know if it's like 22 karat gold or whatever it is, badges, but I actually got Charlie Gallagher recently. So he's right in my collection. He's one of the first. You get Billy McNeil as your first, obviously Caesar is your first, but then Charlie comes into it, and it comes along with I think it's a game. Was it the Ludogorets? Was that? Did we play Ludogorets?
In the run to the final?
Yeah.
Vojvodina was the game. Yeah,
Vojvodina. And Charlie scored in that game, did he not?
He took the decisive corner.
That's right.
Yep. And I reckon that was the toughest game all season, Danny. When you talk to the surviving Lions, that was the game that they actually thought, it was touch and go. It was on a knife edge. Charlie Gallagher crosses it in for Big Billy. And the same thing happened a couple of years previously against Dunfermline, of course, and that is the basis of the kick that started a revolution, which is the name of the poem that Kevin Graham has written just for Charlie. So all the best. I hope him and his family have a fantastic day to celebrate Charlie Gallagher's 80th birthday. We're talking about European football. Let's have a look ahead to Thursday then. We've had a couple of weeks of it, Danny. I mean, team has come in under some amount of criticism. We then go out against Lille. We see a return to form, I think, of many of the players, but as a team, as a unit. Yeah. And we get what I think will be a result that improves with age. I think we're going to look back on that Lille result as the season goes on, when you see them developing as a side, the French side, and we'll look back and say what a result that was away from home.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. the deciding factor for me, and I said this in the car on the way over, the deciding person on that team for me is Bain.
Mm-hmm.
The way that he holds his back line and the way that he is not afraid to scream at them. Barkas came into that team, don't get me wrong, Barkas still has time to prove himself, but for me, Bain is our number one because he's been there when we needed him, when the chips were down, and he had to go in and debut against that mob, and we won it 3-2.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, obviously, to concede 2 goals in your debut game, it's nothing noteworthy, but the man has a treble under his belt. So when he is in that net, he's commanding respect the second his name goes on that team sheet.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people turn around and look at Barkas and go, well, you haven't been here. You haven't been through the crap the rest of us have been through. Whereas Bain has, and he's he plays for that jersey. And I think that he commanded the back line in the first half against Lille phenomenally.
Mm-hmm.
The second half, legs were getting tired. People were burning out. I thought Incham should have been off after 55 minutes because he was dead in the water. And one of his passes went astray and led, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, it led to the first goal, which then seemed to start weighing down on the team. And it's the thing of, if you're 2-0 up, that's fantastic. They weren't pushing for 3 enough, and Lille just managed to find a way back into it. Fair enough, we still drew. And, if we get 2 good results against Sparta Prague and then get a win against Lille at home, happy days, we'll through the next round. But I'm just putting my hands up now and saying I actually don't give a crap about the European football.
I was going to ask.
I just want us to go for another treble.
I was going to ask you, Danny, because that's the big conversational point. I had a similar discussion last week with Jim Orr, and Jim is of the same opinion as yourself. He wants to focus on the domestic. He wants to focus on the 10 in a row. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're progressing. I'll talk to you about us progressing against Aberdeen to the final. That it's quite incredible when you think about it. 4 trebles in a row. It's an astonishing feat to be 1 game away from such an accolade. We're talking about Charlie Gallagher, John Fallon, the Lisbon Lions, and that is the pinnacle. Obviously, the Lisbon Lions. It will always be the pinnacle. But what we're doing and what we're currently witnessing is something that is up there with the greatest achievements that this club has ever witnessed. 4 trebles in a row potentially. The only team that stands between Celtic and that incredible success is Hearts. Now, going into the game, again, we wanted to build on the performance against Lille. And I think we did that against Aberdeen. Now, I take your point, what you said there about Incham. I thought the same about Christie, who done a power of work against Lille. He looked a bit heavy-legged when he failed to get the boy at the back post, for Lille's goal. No, I'm not criticising Christie, because I think he's been one of our best players all season. But I just think it came down to fatigue. And Lenny himself mentioned that, after the game. We go in against Aberdeen. Lawrence, we've praised Bain, and a clean sheet against Aberdeen. The defence seems to be settled, even though, Duffy's playing with someone different, it would appear, pretty regularly. But I think with Bain there's a bit of a calming influence. You then bring in Beaton. Beaton's the coolest player in the squad. Sometimes too cool. But I think what we're seeing there is we're seeing a team. It's been forced upon us in many of the areas, but we're seeing a team developing there where I asked you before the game, Lawrence, before the broadcast rather, what's your team for Thursday night?
I wouldn't change anything, even if Ayer's fit. No, I think I'm a bit with Danny. I don't really care about Europe. I still want performances out of the team. This cup run and winning trophies on the spin, outside of 10 in a row, it's winning trophy after trophy after trophy. And domestically, it's unbelievable. And that's something I want to keep going, even more than the 10 in a row. Because I think, if we were to do the 4th treble, I think that's going to stand up against the 10 in a row. I mean, Juve is going to do 10. There's a number of teams that have done 10 in a row. 12 domestic trophies in a row. On the spin, 4 trebles. It's unbelievable, isn't it? With Bain, I think Bain's got the number 1 shirt just now. Well, it's going to be hard for Barkas to get back in unless Bain has a howler. I don't think Barkas done anything particularly wrong. He's not had any really big saves where we go, wow. Like Gordon against for Hearts against Hibs, that save he pulled off. Barkas could probably do with a few of them under his belt. But I see more Bain as a backup keeper, but it could be proved wrong. You know, if we get to January, he's still number one. Depending on how the team's doing, you know, I think I wouldn't be alone in this sport wondering, you know, is it time to give a shout for Big Fraser?
I've seen that a couple of times this week, Lawrence, and the thing with Barkas is he's not been dropped. You know, he dropped out due to injury, and then it's only fair, you would guess, that if the goalkeeper that comes in performs well, it's his jersey to lose. So, you know, you stick with Bain until such times as he has a loss of form before you look at Barkas. And, you know, I've spoken to some Celtic fans who say, well, £4.5 million for a goalie, he's got to play. Well, I think it comes down to form. It comes down to form, and you're looking at Shane Duffy, who's someone else I want to focus on, Danny. He's coming for a lot of criticism. He is the guy we all wanted, I think. You know, universally, when he signed, everybody was happy that he'd signed. Shane Duffy's here for the 10. All that kind of stuff, great. He's struggled a wee bit, but I think we've seen signs in the last couple of games that he's overcoming that.
Slightly. Very, very slightly. I think there's been a couple of times that him and Callum McGregor look like they're crashing into each other. And don't get me wrong, Calmac isn't free of criticism ever. He has his good games and his bad games, but I just don't think Duffy is performing. I don't know if it's something mental, physical. Obviously, there was the game last week where he ended up going down on his shoulder and he held his arm for about, 10 minutes or so in the game he held it. And I mean, obviously you'd think if he's holding it for that length of time, maybe you're probably going to be going off, but he didn't. I think he can come good. But as I've said several times, a lot of Celtic supporters are spoiled. We've had so many victories. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing to win 12 trophies on the bounce, 10 in a row, unbelievable. But all the people I talk to, and especially folk older than me who say you've got to remember the 90s, when Celtic barely won a game. It was loss after loss after loss. And you still went out and celebrated as if you won because you were just used to it at that point. But now we're so used to winning that if somebody performs bad, it's unacceptable. But, I mean, just as you were saying about Barkas as well, 4.5 million, he has to play. No, he doesn't. I could turn around tomorrow and say I'll sell you John Dykes and Lawrence Connolly for 10 million apiece for your radio show. That's the value that a team places on someone because of the loss. The value of someone doesn't dictate that they have to play. I mean, Kieran Tierney, how long was it before he ended up getting his first game for Arsenal?
Yeah, I did think he was come back from injury as well, though, but wasn't he? Tierney well, but even when he got bled in, it was a lower game, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. It was one of the cups.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, people are saying, don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, I think Duffy will come good. He's only here for one season. And I think that will be it. I think he'll go back to Brighton at the end of it. I can see next year being a clear out anyway.
I was watching with interest fairly recently Belgium playing England, and obviously Belgium being the number one team in the world. And their centre-half partnership was Jason Denayer and Dedrick Boyata. And you're looking at that thinking to yourself, all right, so we could have had the best central defensive partnership in the world, or a partnership that is playing for the best team in the world. And I think, you know, it's a area of the pitch that over the years we have struggled from time to time to find that blend, to find that partnership. And it's a discussion we've had quite a few times on this podcast where, you know, as much as they were unfancied at times, Gordon Strachan found a partnership in Stephen McManus and Gary Caldwell. Now, you know, we went out and beat teams like AC Milan and so forth, and we won doubles, etc. And we got to the last 16 in the Champions League with that partnership. I think there was a period after that. Mowbray came in, tore that partnership up. Took us a while to find a partnership. And then we got one with I think, Virgil van Dijk and Denayer, who I rated them very, very highly as a partnership, Lawrence. A lot of people used to say to me, Van Dijk makes Denayer look good. But I think when you look at the way Denayer's progressed in the game, he's a player in his own right. And now we find ourselves again looking at the situation where we're trying to find a defensive partnership. Do we have one long term in Julian and Ayer, or will we even get the chance to see that with, you know, some of the European teams that are looking at the likes of Ayer? I mean, do we have, who is your best two Who's your best partnership at centre half?
It's a struggle just now to say who's going to be best. You'd have thought, there's a shout for Julian and Ayer, but we get a clean sheet there with Duffy and Beaton. I think it's going to be one of those. It's test it out, see how the team performs. I don't, if Ayer's fit, I wouldn't let him walk back into the team. We want a settled back line, don't you? We need to start putting together a run of. We've had some performances that are on the up. Now we need to start putting together a run of victories. I wouldn't be changing it. Ayers, he's a class player. I think along with Duffy, he'll only be here for till the end of this season. I think Beaton will stick with us. What next year is going to look like in football, who knows, with COVID and where income's going to come from. So it's who you're going to be able to afford. Young Welsh looked good when he's come through. So, there's hope there for the future. But, we don't have the options of getting what would be our best on, do we? I think just now at centre half, it's been who's fit.
At the moment, it's been like that, isn't it? I mean, if Ayer comes back in, I would be tempted, I must admit, because I think his performances against Lille, I think the reason he went off after 53 minutes was a deciding factor in what thereafter happened. And I agree with Danny. We probably should have made substitutions earlier. You had players like Ncham, Christie and Brown, I think, went off after 81 minutes. That was 20 minutes too late for me. We should have made these substitutions earlier. But the deciding factor for me was Ayer's departure. I think he's been our best defender over the piece this season. Does he go right back in, or are you going to try and look for that continuity in the defence? It's a decision to be made. I think sometimes I try and think to myself, it's not about what I would do. What do you think Neil Lennon's going to do? Well, I think he'll bring Ayer back in if he's fit to partner Duffy. I think that's his first two. That's his first two picks, I think. So that'll be an interesting one. Other than that, is there any other changes, Danny, that you would make for the team on Thursday night?
No, I don't think so. I think the team, well, I would start at Jetty over Edward. I know that people probably think that's an insane thing, and I can't wait to see the slaggings I get in the comments for that. But Edward is the talisman of the team. He's the big name, he's the big draw. Every defender wants to mark him. And when I say every, that means the entire back line marks him. Whereas Ajeti is seen as being good. He's a good finisher, but defenders aren't as quick to swarm on him. And I think at the early stage of the game, it's best to have him on, because he'll be able to break down defences a bit faster. El Yunusi will be able to use Ajeti the way they did against Lille, which was absolutely phenomenal. The passing there was just second to none. And then when Edward manages to come on, if it is 45 minutes or 50 or 60 minutes, then I'd say even bring him and Griffiths on, and that defence will be knackered and they won't be ready for that partnership. I mean, one thing I love about Griffiths is that he will chase down any keeper and he will pressure them into making a mistake. And that's where a lot of last season's goals came from, was the pressure being put on the goalkeepers, which hasn't happened as much this season because we're holding back a bit. We're stopping before the final third, which I think just go for it, hell for leather.
See, earlier on this season, Danny, we had a conversation on here about people who had almost become the forgotten men at Celtic within the first team squad. And a couple of the names were Tommy Rogic and the aforementioned Lee Griffiths, because Lee had disappeared from view after coming back, apparently from pre-season training a wee bit overweight or unfit. And then he disappeared. He wasn't even on the bench for several weeks. Tommy Rogic, we almost sold him. It looked as though that deal was going to go through, £4 million. He was going to move to Qatar, apparently. It broke down, and thankfully it did. Now, they both come back in. They perform against St Johnstone particularly well. Griffiths gets his goal. And now, Rogic is looking almost undroppable. I mean, the last two games, 4 assists. Are we seeing a Tommy Rogic of old re-emerging in this Celtic side?
I think he knows there's going to be a clear out next season, but he's not going to be. I don't think he'll be part of it. I think Edward will go. Ayer will go. But I think that'll hopefully make way for us buying Laxalt. Because I would love to keep him. I absolutely love to keep him. But I think Rogic could easily finish his career at Celtic with being one of the greatest and remembered forever. Because he does have that ability to come into a team. I mean, he was the one who scored the goal against Aberdeen. Like, no other person in their right mind would have thought about shooting from that angle, but he just thought, the hell with it, I'm just going to take a pop. And it worked, which was great. 4 assists in the last 2 games. That's a player who is going out to prove a point that he doesn't want to be dropped. Which, if he keeps form, I mean, that's what, like, you've got him, you've got Ajeti, El Yunusi, Bain, Laxalt, all these players who last season, if you had a thought about trying to fit them into the squad, there would have been no place for them. But now it's coming to the front. And actually, I will say one change I would make. I wouldn't play Brown on Thursday. I'd play Turnbull.
Well, Turnbull, again, his game time has been kind of minimal over the last few games, isn't it? I mean, Lawrence, a player you and I have spoken about that Danny mentioned there, El Yunusi, we were trying to figure out what his best position was. And then in the last couple of games, again, he's one of the guys that stood out. I mean, is he being rejuvenated by Laxalt behind him? Because his performances have been tremendous behind El Yunusi. And I think it's maybe fed off of those performances.
Yeah, it's partnerships looking after that side of the park. We've got Christie and Frimpong working it well on the right. It looks like Diego and El Yunusi are going to work well. Obviously, El Yunusi knows Ajeti from their time at Ball together. So there's going to be an understanding that's already there. But I think it's getting the individuals are starting to perform as a team all over the park now for us, isn't it? And it's whether they've got a point to prove. Like Tom coming back in, he's almost out the door. Whether Scott Bain wants to make that jersey is number one. Lenny says there's been a change in his attitude even before the performance.
Yeah.
You've got young Welsh who's come in, not let it settle down. Maybe the players have just said, look, we're coming in for a lot of flack here that we think is unfair and undeserved, and the manager's coming in for a lot of flack that they think is unfair and undeserved. Maybe the siege mentality is there, and it's Lenny's getting them, into a band of brothers again, and hopefully, we can see performances that don't lack the fight that some have certainly looked as if the performances have lacked fight at certain points during the season so far. Hopefully, Lenny's got that commitment out of them when they're on the park that they're going to give everything.
One thing, sorry, I have to interrupt or disagree with, is Christie and Frimpong. During the Lille game, they didn't seem to know what the other one wanted to do. There was a lot of misplayed passes where we were giving the ball away and then it would be out for a throw-in to Lille. And it just seemed like it dragged the game down a bit.
I think Christie and Frimpong, it's developing partnership. They'll play the riskier passes. Certainly Christie will play the riskier passes, which maybe not every player in the team is going to want to play. Well, under Brendan, it was all about retain the ball, don't play the risky pass, move it about. I think Lenny wants to move them away from that to playing the riskier passes. Part of playing the riskier passes, they don't work as often. Frimpong's learning his position. I think,
what happens?
I don't see him as a right back. I don't see Frimpong as a right back, but the last couple of games he's looked good. For me, he's not right back, but
I think he's good at right back.
I would right wing back maybe, but right back I think, so far this season he's been caught high up the pitch. He's too far away from his centre halves. But then again, we say we need to give young players a chance because player development. How do we develop them unless they make mistakes in games? That's where their experience comes from. And I guess if we're going to develop a young player like Frimpong, we need to understand he's going to have deficiencies that he's working on, and hopefully we see them improving over the season. And I think the last few games he's definitely improved, I think.
When you mentioned there Turnbull for Brown, Danny, a lot of Celtic fans have been calling for Turnbull to come in, particularly when we weren't playing so well, maybe just for a change of approach. Do you think it's important more than anything to give Brown a bit of a breather from time to time, bring in Turnbull, or is it about a different approach? Because I think Turnbull will give us more of an offensive threat.
I think it is. It's the fact that it's hard to say. Like, don't get me wrong, Brown has no problem taking on a player when he has the ball at his feet. He also has no problem tackling. But I think Turnbull's going to be younger, fitter, faster. And I think that's what El Yunusi and players like that and Frimpong are needing, is someone who can run towards a defence, make that split-second decision to boot the ball with the outside of the boot, fire it over to the right wing, and wait for that cross to come in, but also be chasing that return cross. Brown is obviously a very good holding midfielder to drop back and make sure that he's there for the defensive actions as well, whereas I think Turnbull would have that speed to be in the box. If the ball breaks, he can get back. Don't get me wrong, I love Brown. Brown's, I mean, he's going to be a legend when he does eventually go. But yeah, I think it'd be better to give him a rest. And I think especially in the European games, which are a lot more demanding, because I think in the league, midfielders have a fear of Brown, whereas in Europe they don't as much, because they're coming up against these teams that, you know, just have pretty much psychotic players throughout their entire squad and who will tackle anybody and be happy to get red carded for it. But I think Turnbull would do very, very well in Europe if he was in.
I'll be interested to see a wee bit more of him, Danny, for sure. Francie WLU, who is commenting on YouTube, and welcome back to the show, Francie. You say that the only change you'd make is Elhamed for young Frimpong. Give the wee fella a breather. And again, that's important. He's playing a lot of games, this Frimpong. We take it sometimes for granted. I mean, he's in my team every single week when I predict the side. Maybe it is about time we gave him a bit of a breather. Or, Lawrence, do you think, you know, when you're looking at the balance of that side with the emergence of Lac-Salt since he's come in, that Frimpong requires more and more games? I mean, I like Elhamed. I think he's a far more solid defensive player. But he's okay going forward. I do like Elhamed, and it might be an idea to give Frimpong a rest.
I would still start Frimpong, but I think, you know, we've got 3 games a week for a bit of time now. We've got players coming back to fitness. It's going to be about using the squad. I'd start with Brown, but I would be looking to bring on Turnbull or Sorrell in that midfield to give them game time. Frimpong, I mean, I've already said, I don't. As long as we get performances in Europe, I don't really care. You know, it's the trophies on the spin run that's brilliant. You know, the treble run is more important to me.
The treble run. I mean, even the fact that we're discussing a treble run, Lawrence, it's incredible. Yeah. 35 games, and none of the games went to replay. So 35 one-off games Celtic have won. That's almost an entire league campaign of wins.
Yep.
It's an astonishing record. And I mean, to be honest with you, I'd have much rather have played Hearts and Hibs, and it's no disrespect to Hearts, because I do rate Hibs. I've said that many, many times on this podcast. I like the management team at Hibs. They've bought well, and I think they're a strong side, and they're going to get better. But I'm glad that we're playing Hibs, not because I think it'll be a pushover, far from it. These games never will be. But we are 90 minutes away from a quadruple treble. That's astonishing. We're
going to have to face Big Craig, aren't we? Who's going to get, I think we touched on the weekend, he's going to get both a winners and a losers medal. So I think it's Craig Gordon that stands between us in that 4th treble in a row.
There was an interesting point last night on another podcast whereby it was noted that Andy Halliday's already been knocked out of this competition whilst playing for Rangers. And now he's in the final for Hearts.
So another record player. So, you know, listen to it.
It's incredible.
Funny if Morelos goes to Hearts, he would score against Celtic.
Aye, probably. First touch of the ball. Now, IH Decorating also kept commenting on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, remember to subscribe, and you can get notifications of our daily broadcasts, all the match day stuff, and some extras with interviews, etc. You even get a sing-song from time to time from the likes of Danny Kelly. If you want to order some Danny Kelly merch, then the web address is currently along the bottom of your screen. Use the promo code AXON for 10% off and support live music and live musicians like Danny. IH Decorating is looking for Barkas, Elhamed, Beaton, Duffy and Lac-Salt, McGregor, Brown, Christie, Rogic, El Yunusi and Eddie. So a couple of changes from the team that I would play, but I can understand the changes. Let's talk a wee bit more about Diego. Now, I take it from what you've said so far, Danny, that you've been very impressed with our new recruit.
Yes. First game against Rangers, I think that was such a hard game to be thrown into, especially with, don't get me wrong, I hate them, but they've got a good team. They really do have a good team. If you take away penalties, they're not that good, but they've got a good team. And going into that squad, don't get me wrong, playing the training sessions is one thing, but going out and doing it, I think if only we had him in for a few games before that, it'd have been amazing. I think he would have absolutely romped home in that game. I'd say the next time we come up against them, it's going to be a totally different ball game. But against AC Milan and against Lille, he was absolutely fantastic. And against Aberdeen, played out of his skin to create a record in your third or fourth professional game? Third game for Celtic, creating a European record of the most tackles in one game.
I know. Did you see the compilation? I think it was maybe the 20-minute boys that put the compilation together, Danny, and it was astonishing to watch at that level.
Yeah,
Laxalt against Lille, brilliant.
Talk about penalties. So the only penalty Rangers won't be awarded is one for COVID breaches.
Aye,
it's kind of.
What was it? Somebody posted earlier that Andrew Dallas has given them 5 penalties in the space of 180 minutes.
That's some
record.
That's some record.
That'd be difficult to do that. But they found a way.
Somehow they managed to get it.
They found a way. Now, Mo, 50s EK boy, maybe from East Kilbride, guys, do you think?
Could be, yeah.
Possibly. Welcome to the show, Mo. You're commenting on YouTube. Vojvodina, great night. Dad and me in the jungle. Caesar rising like a salmon. Love that expression. Dukla was a breeze. Willie Wallace, first Euro game. Wonderful memories. Well, welcome to the show, and thanks for sharing those memories. I mean, 53 years ago now, where Celtic conquered Europe. And you think about somebody like Charlie Gallagher, who would have been 27 at the time, or there or thereabouts, turning 80 today. So, have a great day with your family, Charlie. I don't think he watches a Celtic State of Mind, but I have met him a couple of times, and he's just a gentleman. When you meet these people, and they're so humble, aren't they? It's incredible. People like Charlie and Big John. I love Big John as well, Danny, because he gives you a completely different take on the game. A very insightful take. And what he says to me the other day was that we need to be aware that some people are being a bit harsh on the Celtic goalies at the moment, and we need to be a little bit less harsh on the keepers. We have lost somebody who was an iconic figure at Celtic in Fraser Foster. Barkas has come in. It's going to be difficult for him to bed in to a new team, a new culture, and that mentality that you don't get at many other clubs, where every game has to be won. Every game, Lawrence, every single game, be that in Europe or domestically. So Big John's message is lay off the goalies.
Yeah, I think he's right. And it's not just every game, it's every goal or conceded is analysed to death. We should never lose a goal. It's, the expectation levels are unrealistic to an extent, aren't they? Never lose a goal, never lose a game. There was this discussion over Lenny, back end of October, he's lost one league game, and it was Celtic were a disaster at times, when you're reading kind of the stuff out there. But, the players are under a lot of pressure, but I suppose that's what happens when you're setting standards that haven't been set before. 4 trebles in a spin, possibly. It's just, the cup run, it's just, it's these guys to an extent that have set this expectation, and the expectations are off the back of how good they've been and how well the Celtic team been performing lately.
I just think back to when Martin O'Neill won the treble, and the relevance of that, because it's at that point that the old heads in the Celtic View and all these different vehicles start talking about the last time we did that, under Jock Stein. And you think, wow, we're getting into a European final. Probably the one and only time I'll see it. That's what I'm thinking at the time, Lawrence, back in 2003. We win a treble. You think, wow, that's almost like once in a lifetime. And then, fast forward to where we are now, 4 trebles potentially on the bounce. And at the moment, we're actually still in all the domestic tournaments as well, so we could be even looking at 5. Am I just getting greedy?
No, but it's, would you ever have thought, in the cup run, 35 cup games, 12 games, anything can happen. dodgy penalty awarded against us, just the team not perform anything, but to keep that run going. And it's this group of players, by and large, that have set these expectation levels that we now have.
See, when you're looking at the game against Hearts, we'll think forward a wee bit, because, I mean, it's only next month, isn't it? It's going to be
20.
a December time, you know. Cup final against Hearts. You think back to Lenny's cup final, where he's come in, he's the interim manager, and he wraps up the league, he wraps up the treble. He gets the job permanently. And I think back to that game there and how difficult that was, actually. You know, and we actually did need big performances for the likes of Edouard. I don't think we're playing a Hearts team that's going to be as strong as that.
Yeah, no,
I don't just mean because they're in a different division now. I mean, you look at the personnel, and yeah, they've strengthened with Gordon, but I don't think we're going to have that same challenge.
I heard Budge has asked for 50% of the tickets for the final.
Aye.
Nah, I think, you know, Naismith is older. Boyce is good up front. Gordon's good. Out the rest of the team, you know, we know what they've got. Andy's a serial loser, isn't he? So it's
Budge is a serial loser.
yeah, I think you're right. It shouldn't be as big a challenge. I think that the biggest challenge is going to be overcoming Craig Gordon. You know, it could be one of those that he has just to.
But we know him well.
Yep.
We know his deficiencies. The players know him as well, Lawrence. You know, that could work in our favour.
But are we likely to get a penalty?
I think.
Are we likely to get a penalty? Are you kidding?
Well, you're just talking about Gordon's deficiencies. I was just saying, are we likely to get a penalty?
All right.
You know?
I think that's part of what I actually am looking forward to the most in the final, is the fact that you've got all these players who, in it, obviously you're defining whether or not you get the number one jersey by your training performances and your first team performances. So during training, Edouard and El Yunusi and these players must have just been slotting it past Gordon for fun, to have him then be a third string behind Bain. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope it was like 4 or 5-0 and we just romp it home for the crack.
Should we make it kind of 8-1? Would be great, wouldn't it?
He's a great shot stopper. He's a brilliant shot stopper, Craig Gordon. He's strong on his left, but not so strong on his right in terms of kicking.
Yep.
And all these wee things, Celtic will know that inside out. Stevie Woods knows that goalkeeper intimately. Maybe not as intimately as others, but he knows him intimately. And I think that'll be massive, because he is the star man. I take your point, Danny. You know, people like Boyce, he's a guy that could play for most teams in the Premiership, like it was mentioned last night on another podcast, and do particularly well with various sides. How many others though? Because as you say, Lawrence, Naismith's a year older. I mean, there's not many of them, the players within the Hearts side. But then on a day, going back to what you said, anything is possible. And with a cup game, we've all seen games where it's been Celtic pressure constantly. You just know it's not your day. You're not going to get a win, and someone nicks a goal, and that's it. I'm hoping and praying that's not the case. And I think if we see the Celtic turning up that we've seen against Aberdeen, that we've seen for an hour against Lille, and hopefully that we'll see from now until the game, because I do think we've turned a corner. I really do. I think there's been an energy about the side that was lacking a wee bit beforehand. We've got players coming back from injury. We're speaking about Ayer coming back, giving us options at the back. El Hamid's coming back. Where's Mikey Johnson? He can't be far away. He's going to come back and give us another option. We've now got 4 strikers to pick from. So I think as that happens and the momentum happens, you know, Rogic, a few weeks ago we didn't think he'd be in the squad. Now he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Cham's on the bench, Turnbull's on the bench. If we turn up as we know we can, then it'll be a historic day.
Yeah.
Do you know one of the names that keeps getting left out, and it's always left out ever, is Forrest?
I know.
Everybody's leaving Forrest out of all these conversations. Sorry for it. I just have to say this, because when we're talking about the difference in the team, he's the biggest difference. Him and Julian are two major differences to that team this season from last season. And don't get me wrong, people laugh about the way that Forrest runs, but he's fast, and he can get past a player, and he can find a pass.
He's got the medals to prove he's done it, isn't he? He's been there, done it. He's the Celtic legend.
And another thing, actually, in response to someone saying that they would give Frimpong a rest, if McGregor can play the most games in Europe out of any player, Frimpong, who's probably, was he like 4 or 5 years younger than him, he should be playing every single game.
Well, I think it's good now we're getting options. We're getting players back from illness and out of quarantine. it's good that we have options. I think we're going to have to use the squad, whether that's making subs quicker, because we've now got 5 subs this season, where we can say, well, we'll have more of a game plan to change things up and say, well, if we're 2 or 3 up at half time, let's get 3 on, we've still got 2 subs.
No, you're right. Manage that. Definitely, Lawrence. There's a good point coming in from Clancy, who is commenting on Twitter. Thanks for your comment. Ultimately, the 10 in a row is a priority and nothing should jeopardise it. The reason I'm bringing that up is I had an interesting discussion yesterday with Kevin Graham all about that, talking about priorities, talking about realistically what do you want to actually achieve this season. Because, 4 trebles in a row is an astonishing achievement, but there will come a time, and we all know that, we're all realistic in that respect. And my answer to that was, I want 10 in a row. For so many different reasons. When you're looking at the historical relevance of that, Danny, what it means to us as a club. But also, I think it's important from the financial aspect of the club. Coming out of COVID, we need to have that continual success and that gateway back into the Champions League. And we do need it as a club. No matter who you are, it's going to hit us hard. But I also want the quadruple treble. So if we come away this season having beaten Hearts in December in the final and we win the league, and I don't care if it's by a goal, if we win the league this season, I'll be satisfied with that. How about yourself?
Absolutely. I don't care about Europe. I don't care about the 2 other cup competitions. I want 10 in a row. We've got 6 more or 7 more. I think we will have 7 more Scottish Cups than Rangers. We'll have 4 more Scottish League Cups. We do have 4 more Scottish League Cups. I want to close that gap between them having 54 and just going for 55 nonsense. I hope that we get 55 before they do, just so we can rub it in their snouts. Because that'd be absolutely hilarious, and that would be the pinnacle of all these banter years that we've been having.
Yep.
But 10 in a row, it's never been achieved in Scotland. It has to be achieved by someone. Someone has to be the first, and I think it's over 130 years now. We have to do it. We have to just get that cemented. We've already won the biggest trophy in club competition.
Yep.
We've done treble after treble after treble after treble.
Hopefully. 1 game to go.
1 game to go, and it's against the first division team, or championship team. And I think all aspects should be right on the league. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's people out there who'll call me mental and shout the odds at me for not wanting us to win everything, but you can't. If you had asked anyone 20 years ago, do you think Celtic would ever win a back-to-back treble, or even an invincible treble?
I know.
They would have called you an absolute psychopath for thinking we could have went a whole season without losing a game and winning the treble.
I'm ambitious, but that doesn't even seem realistic, Danny. You think that's never going to happen, and here we are. Now,
we've even got the president of bloody Albania supporting us.
Listen, but when you think about it, we beat Hearts in the final. There's 4 trebles in a row. Just add another one, because we know how to do it. We know how to do the trebles.
This is a big thing as well, Lawrence, that people look at the Scottish game. And in one of our very, very early podcasts, it must have been within the first 3 episodes of A Celtic State of Mind, I interviewed Alan McRae. Can you remember the interview? At the time, the then SFA president, whose comments around Celtic winning trebles were challenged because he said that it was boring. Celtic winning trebles was boring for Scottish football. Now, that for me it wasn't like a red rag to a bull. It just showed you the kind of nature of the Scottish game in terms of the highest echelons of those in authority, whereby they found it boring to award for merit, Lawrence. It was merit.
Yeah.
There was nothing put down. It was meritorial. There was nothing put down that allowed Celtic to win those trebles. They'd done it on merit, hard work, having the discipline and the better players and the better management team and the whole foundation of the club. Now, we're now looking at a situation where we've almost done it 4 times in a row. It's not going to get boring for anybody in this room, or indeed who's joined us on this broadcast. But we should never, for a moment, underestimate what goes into winning a domestic treble.
It's got to be, it's a world record. It's these guys are history makers on the treble alone. There's a few teams done 10 in a row that, but back-to-back trebles, then another treble. We're now going for another, potentially a fifth one as well. It's just unbelievable stuff. I mean, this team should be, the treble run should be more publicised and more shouted about outside the Celtic circles, just for the sheer consistency. The sheer will to win they've shown in some games where maybe they haven't turned up, but we've still got through those cup games, we've still won. I don't know, somebody could probably do some kind of statistical calculation, maybe Alan Morrison, Celtic, by numbers, just on odds alone. 35.
What would the odds have been? I know. What would the odds have been? It's astonishing, Lawrence. Now, I've been getting quite a few messages coming through, so thank you for everybody for identifying someone who probably shouldn't have been in the broadcast, Danny. We do get that from time to time. But they're normally weeded out very quickly by those who are listening, and they give us a wee heads up, so just to let you all know, they're now blocked. Now, Kevin Graham, who was in yesterday, mentions that the international break is coming up and Brown gets a rest during that. But I think what you're looking at really, Danny, is an opportunity where if you can rest Brown for a game like the game on Thursday night, then it's an opportunity to do that without him being dropped. It's not as though you're dropping him, is it? You're just resting him for a game here or there. I was surprised when he didn't make the starting lineup at Pittodrie, for example. I don't think that was the right game to rest him or drop him.
No, definitely not. Those are two words that give me the absolute willies, man. International break.
We could do without it.
90% of our team goes off to the international break and catches COVID, and then obviously Gerrard's been smart and he's bought good players, but players who majority don't represent their national squads, apart from Stephen Davis, who's crap anyway. But it's that's my panic, is during this international break you've got them coming back in. We lost Beaton, El Hamid, who else was gone? Christie. Lost Eddie. So we lost 4 players.
We had to charter a plane for Barkas.
Aye.
That's right.
So 5 players potentially causing disruptions in amongst the squad. My worry is that more players go out, and then when they come back, people like Brown, who haven't been in the national squad or exposed to it, have to pick up more games.
Good point.
Yeah, you'll get a rest during the international break, but you'll probably get a phone call telling you, by the way, you're going to have to work twice as hard after this break because now we've lost 6-7 players.
Exactly.
There's in my opinion, international competition should just be completely stopped.
The thing is, if we picked up a good run of wins up to the international break, you'd be going, it's coming at the wrong time for us. We don't want to, if we're getting a bit of continuity in the team, they've got momentum, the last thing you want is an international break.
If I was a player, right, and this is the only option that would be available to anyone, for the goodness of yourself, we're talking about looking after the players. If someone gets the illness, which has been proved at Celtic, it's so possible for a fit athlete in their 20s to get this illness and for it to hit them hard, because Beaton and El Hamid have spoken about that. And what we need to look upon is a duty of care. So where does the duty of care lie? Well, does it lie with the club? Because the club can't pull players from international duty. That was made pretty clear when we started seeing the call-offs, the amount of cases regarding COVID. So does the duty of care lie with the SFA? And this is a big question. What if something happened with one of the players where they were affected, their health was affected in the long term because they were more or less selected, which meant the club was forced to send them to go and play an international game? The only option for a player at this moment in time to avoid this is to retire from international football. Because as you say, Danny, I agree with you. There should be absolutely no international football being played at this moment in time, and arguably no European competition should be getting played either. And I just think that we're going to be holding our breath. Like you say, you hear those two words, international break, and you think, oh no, what players, normally you're thinking what players are going to get injured. This is a much bigger worry. Which players are going to contract the virus and come back? And then how long are they going to be out for? But how is it going to affect that individual in the long term, not just in the short term where they might miss a couple of games? So if I was a player, I would be looking after my own interests in that respect, and I'd be very selfish. I'd just retire. Now, if they wanted to bring you back 6 months down the line or whatever, or whenever this is not going to be as big an issue as it is just now, then fine. If they didn't, then that speaks volumes anyway. But that's what I would be doing. I'd be retiring from the game. I wouldn't be travelling on international duty at this moment in time.
It's not just the SFA. I mean, the other associations, we supplied the plane for Barkas. So how are the players getting there? They're not, they're using commercial flights.
Yeah.
If they really want to protect them in duty of care, could they not put on a flight for them if they're that important to go to? Charter a plane for them. But yeah, retiring's definitely one option, isn't it?
And I don't think there would be a backlash, Lawrence. I don't think fans would say, "Oh, you should never play for your country again." We've seen that in the past, where somebody maybe doesn't like the manager, or someone goes here, there, and everywhere, and is sitting on a bench, so they think, "Well, I'm not doing that." That's different. I think if you took a stand, you would actually be more respected for taking that stand.
It's easy to retire and then come back, and Paul Scholes did it at Man United. Went away for
Scott's
6
done
months.
it. Brownie's done it. Scott Brown done it.
That's right. He did it international level, but Scholes did it at club level.
Yep.
Fergie wanted him back, he came back. Just like that. But that's the thing. If you were to turn around to anybody and say, "Listen, I don't feel comfortable doing this right now because of all the things going on in the world," if the national teams to take umbrage with that, I think that most of that nation's people or fans of the team would still turn around and say, "Do you know what? We're happy enough for him to bow out because we're not getting to travel to games anyway."
To be honest, I don't even know what competition these international games are for. It doesn't involve Celtic.
What is this Nations League
God
nonsense
knows.
like?
Doesn't involve Celtic. So Manchester's just kind of went.
Yeah.
So if it's Nations League or whatever it is,
Bloody Nations
who cares?
League. It's just friendlies.
Can you win a treble in the Nations League?
Listen, my priority is always Celtic when it comes to football, Lawrence. Absolutely. And we're talking about 4 trebles in a row. We're talking about 10 in a row. And nobody in the room's taking any of this for granted. I mean, what goes into that achievement is absolutely astonishing. But we're getting to that point of the show, Danny, where I'm going to be asking for predictions for Thursday night. You started off today's show with some superb tunage on your acoustic, and just a reminder to everybody who's tuning in, you can order Danny Kelly merch today with 10% off at dannykellymusic.bigcartel.com using the promo code AXON. So thank you for being a guest on the show once again, Danny, and you're welcome back anytime you want. Give us a prediction for Thursday night.
4-1.
4-1, excellent. I love that positivity, and that's the only positive I want.
Last time I was
is
here,
that
I said 6-0, it was 5-0. So
you did, aye.
So
Ross County.
Yeah.
if I say 4-1, it'll be 3-1. Happy days.
Aye, I'll take that. Lawrence.
I'm going to go 3-0. Not having seen Sparta, I think, but they've not played in a while. That they've been, releasing press and that. I think we're performing as a team. I think Lenny will get us into an early 2-0 lead by half time, but this time we'll come out at a few changes and add a third in the second half.
I'm going to go 1-0 myself, and I just think that building on the last 2 performances, we will get a result. We will get a positive result. But every time I go for a heavy victory, like a 5 or a 6, we end up getting beat, Danny, so I'm not going to do that. 1-0 for me. Now, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will get Kevin Graham's Charlie Gallagher tribute poem up very, very soon. If I can manage to do it in a broadcast, I'll come back on. But either way, it will end up on YouTube. All that's left for me to say today is Danny Kelly, Lawrence Connolly, thank you again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.